When a 10-year-old boy, whose eyes held a fear far older than his years, began using the same grimy payphone every single night at 9 o'clock sharp, it was the one man who noticed the pattern who was uniquely equipped to understand it. That man was a biker named Styx, a former detective whose instincts, honed over 2 decades of seeing the worst of humanity, screamed that something was profoundly wrong. His decision to trust that gut feeling, to follow the silent plea of a child who had learned to hide his terror in plain sight, set off a chain of events that would turn a series of quiet, lonely nights into a desperate rescue mission, proving that sometimes the only person who can hear a cry for help is the one who knows how to listen for the silence that follows. The gas station was an island of harsh fluorescent light in a sea of suburban darkness. It was the kind of place people used but never truly saw, a necessary stop for fuel and stale coffee on the way to somewhere better. The asphalt was cracked and stained with the ghosts of 1,000 oil spills. The air hung thick with the smell of gasoline and the faint, sweet scent of cheap air fresheners failing to mask the grime inside the convenience store. By day, it was a blur of motion. By night, it was a lonely outpost, its light a beacon for moths and weary travelers. For Styx, it was simply the end of his nightly ride. At 52, his road name, earned from his tall and lean frame, had stuck with him longer than his police badge. He was a member of the Iron Sentinels Motorcycle Club, a brotherhood forged not in crime, but in shared service. Most of them were veterans, former cops, retired firefighters. Men who had seen the world and decided they still wanted to protect a piece of it, even if that piece was just the stretch of highway they called their own. His bike, a deep chrome and black Harley-Davidson Softail, was his sanctuary. The rumble of its engine was a meditation, a steady vibration that shook loose the memories that still clung to him from his years on the force. He'd been a good detective, one of the best. He had a knack for seeing the fracture in a perfect story, the lie hiding behind a steady gaze. But the job had taken its toll, chipping away at him until there was little left but sharp edges and a quiet sorrow. The MC had smoothed those edges, given him a new purpose. He would end his rides here, at this specific gas station, for a simple reason: the coffee was terrible, but it was always hot, and the clerk never bothered him. He'd lean against the cool brick of the building, sip the burnt brew, and watch the world go by for a few minutes before heading home. It was a ritual. A quiet moment of peace. Until the boy. The first time he saw him, it was a Tuesday. The air was cool, hinting at the coming autumn. The boy was small, swallowed by a grey hoodie that was several sizes too large. He stood at the payphone, the last of its kind in the area, a relic from a time before everyone carried the world in their pocket. A man stood a few feet away, leaning against a beat-up sedan, smoking a cigarette and watching the boy with an unnerving stillness. Styx didn't think much of it at first. Maybe their car broke down. Maybe they didn't have a cell phone. Plausible. But then he saw the boy again on Wednesday. Same time. 9 o'clock. The digital clock on the gas pump glowed with the numbers. The same man stood in the same spot, the orange tip of his cigarette a tiny, angry star in the darkness. The boy held the receiver with 2 hands, his knuckles white. He spoke in a low, rushed monotone, his eyes darting around the empty lot. By Thursday, it was no longer a coincidence. It was a pattern. And in Styx's old line of work, patterns were everything. They were the threads you pulled to unravel a lie. He started to watch, really watch. He saw the way the man's eyes never left the child. He saw the tension in the boy's shoulders, a rigid posture that spoke of constant, coiled fear. The boy never smiled. His face was a pale, solemn mask. After each call, which never lasted more than 3 minutes, the man would grab the boy's arm, a little too tightly, and steer him back to the car. They would drive off without buying gas, without going inside. They were there only for the phone. Styx knew what a happy kid looked like. He knew the easy, careless way they moved through the world, filled with an energy that couldn't be contained. This boy was the opposite. He was a ghost, a small, sad shadow moving through a nightly ritual that felt all wrong. The former detective in his soul, the part of him that could never truly retire, began to stir from its slumber. He started timing his rides to be there a little before 9. He would park his bike in the shadows at the edge of the lot, cutting the engine and letting the night sounds take over. He became part of the scenery, just another biker taking a break. He made sure he was unremarkable. Invisible. From his vantage point, he could see the details. The boy's sneakers were worn, the laces frayed. The hoodie he wore was always the same one. The man, however, seemed agitated, his movements jerky and impatient. He paced while the boy was on the phone, his face a mask of anxious greed. Sticks couldn't hear the words, but he could read the story in their bodies. The man was a predator. The boy was his bait. He felt the old, familiar coldness seep into his gut. It was the feeling he used to get just before a raid, the chilling certainty that he was standing on the edge of something terrible. He had seen this kind of control before. This kind of fear. It was a language he understood fluently. He considered his options. He could call it in, but what would he say? A man and a boy are using a payphone? There was no crime in that. The cops would drive by, see nothing, and leave. They were overworked and understaffed, they needed more than a biker's hunch. He knew he needed something concrete. A signal. A confirmation that his instincts were not just ghosts of his past. He needed the boy to see him. So, on the following Monday, he changed his routine. Instead of hiding in the shadows, he parked his bike directly under one of the buzzing overhead lights. He polished a piece of chrome on his handlebars, the rag moving in slow, deliberate circles. He made himself visible. A large, quiet man on a large, quiet bike. He didn't stare. He just existed. A silent fixture in the boy's nightly horror. The boy, whose name he would later learn was Leo, arrived as always. 9 o'clock. The beat-up sedan pulled in, and the man shoved Leo out with a gruff word. Leo's eyes, wide and dark, swept the lot. They passed over the gas pumps, the darkened car wash, and then they landed on Sticks. For a fraction of a second, their gazes locked. Sticks saw a flicker of something in those eyes. Not just fear. It was a question. A desperate, silent plea for recognition. Sticks gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. He didn't smile. He didn't threaten. He just acknowledged. I see you. Leo's eyes darted back to the man, who was now watching him with narrowed suspicion. The boy quickly turned and went to the phone, his movement stiff. But something had changed. The air was now charged with a new electricity. A connection had been made. The call was shorter that night. Leo hung up the phone and walked back toward the car, his head down. As he passed a trash can near the edge of the light where Sticks was parked, his hand dipped into the pocket of his hoodie. A small, wadded-up piece of paper fell to the ground beside the can. It was so subtle, so quick, that anyone not looking for it would have missed it completely. Sticks didn't move. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the steady rumble of his own past. He waited. He watched the sedan's taillights disappear down the road. He counted to 60, forcing himself to breathe, to stay calm. Then he swung his leg off the bike and walked over to the trash can. The note was a crumpled piece of a napkin. The writing was shaky, childlike. 4 words scrawled in pencil. He is not my dad. The blood in Sticks' veins turned to ice. It was the signal. The confirmation. The gut feeling had been right all along. This wasn't a strange family routine. This was a nightmare, and the boy was living it every single night. He smoothed the napkin out, folded it carefully, and placed it in the pocket of his leather vest. It felt as heavy as a stone. He knew he couldn't wait any longer. He couldn't let that boy get back in that car another night. Tomorrow, it would end. The decision to act was not a choice, it was an imperative. It was the reason he had become a cop in the first place, the core belief that had survived even when his faith in the system had faded. You do not stand by when a child is in danger. You do not wait for permission. You act. He spent the next day planning. He rode the route he'd seen the sedan take, mapping out the streets, the turns, the dead ends. He knew he couldn't do this alone. A lone wolf was a myth, strength came from the pack. He called the president of the Iron Sentinels, a man they called Tank, a former Marine whose calm demeanor hid a will of iron. "I need a favor," Styx said, his voice low. He didn't need to explain the urgency. Tank could hear it. "Name it." "Tomorrow night. 9 o'clock. The gas station on Route 7. I need a welcoming committee. No questions until it's over." There was a pause, then Tank's gruff voice came back, solid as a rock. "We'll be there." "How many?" "All of you," Styx said. Next, he made a more difficult call. He dialed the number of his old partner, Detective Miller. They hadn't spoken much since Styx had retired, but the bond between them was forged in shared danger and too many sleepless nights. "Miller," he answered, his voice weary. "It's Styx. I've got something. It's not official, it's just a feeling. But I'm playing it." Styx laid it all out. The boy, the man, the payphone, the note. He told Miller his plan, to have his brothers block the exits to the gas station the moment the car pulled in. He needed Miller to be close by, to make the official arrest when the time came. He was asking his old friend to put his career on the line based on a hunch. Miller was silent for a long moment. Styx could hear the faint sound of the squad room in the background. "A note that says Chi is not my dad is more than a hunch, Styx. That's probable cause in my book." "Where and when?" "He'll be there at 9. My guys will form a perimeter. Just be ready to roll in when I give the signal." "You got it," Miller said. "Stay safe, you crazy old biker." The plan was set. The pieces were in motion. All that was left was the waiting, and the waiting was the hardest part. The hours crawled by, each tick of the clock a countdown to a confrontation that could go any number of ways. Styx cleaned his bike, checked the tire pressure, oiled the chain. He needed everything to be perfect. He needed to be ready. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the highway, the members of the Iron Sentinels began to arrive at the designated meeting point, a mile down the road from the gas station. They came in 2s and 3s, the low thunder of their engines a gathering storm. Tank was there, along with Bear, Preacher, and a dozen others. They were large men, clad in leather and denim, their faces etched with the lines of hard-lived lives. They looked intimidating, and that was the point. Styx explained the situation, holding up the small, crumpled napkin for them to see. A heavy silence fell over the group. In their world, there was a code, and the first rule of that code was that you protect children. No exceptions. No discussion. The looks on their faces hardened, their easy camaraderie replaced by a cold, focused resolve. "We block the exits," Tank said, his voice a low growl. "No one gets in or out until the police arrive. We form a wall. No one touches the kid." Nods of agreement all around. They were ready. At 8:50 p.m., they rolled out, their engines deliberately quiet. They took up positions in the darkness surrounding the gas station, tucked away in the shadows of adjacent buildings, their headlights off. They were a ring of steel, invisible and waiting. Styx parked in his usual spot, right under the light. He leaned against his bike, his posture relaxed, casual. But inside, every nerve was firing. He was hyper-aware of everything, the buzz of the lights, the distant wail of a siren, the gentle breeze that rustled the leaves of a nearby tree. He felt the weight of his past, the responsibility of his present. He thought of Leo, of the terror in his eyes. He sent a silent message into the night, just one more time. "Be brave for 5 more minutes. We are here." And then, he saw them. The familiar headlights of the beat-up sedan cut through the darkness. It pulled into the lot, parking in the exact same spot as always. The clock on the gas pump flipped to 9 p.m. The passenger door opened, and Leo got out. The man, Rick, followed him, but tonight he seemed different. More agitated. He grabbed Leo's arm, his fingers digging into the boy's thin bicep. Make it fast, he hissed, his voice carrying on the quiet night air. Say exactly what I told you. Not one word more. Leo walked toward the payphone, his steps faltering. His eyes found Styx immediately. This time, there was no question in his gaze. There was only raw, undiluted terror. He knew tonight was different. He could feel it. As Leo picked up the receiver, Styx gave the signal. He clicked his high beams on and off twice. From the darkness, the storm broke. The roar of 15 Harley-Davidson engines erupted at once, a deafening explosion of sound that shattered the night's tranquility. From every direction, motorcycles surged forward, their headlights cutting through the gloom, converging on the small island of light. They formed a perfect, impenetrable circle around the gas station lot, blocking both the entrance and the exit. The sedan was trapped. Rick whirled around, his face a mask of confusion that quickly melted into panic. He saw the wall of chrome and leather, the unblinking eyes of the headlights, the stone-faced men sitting astride their machines. He dropped his cigarette, his hand instinctively going to his waistband. Styx pushed off from his bike and started walking toward them. He moved with a calm, deliberate pace, his boots crunching softly on the loose gravel. He kept his eyes locked on Rick, ignoring the boy for a moment. That's far enough, Styx said, his voice even but carrying the weight of absolute authority. Who the hell are you? Rick snarled, trying to project a confidence he clearly didn't feel. He shoved Leo behind him, using the boy as a shield. This is none of your business. We're leaving. I don't think so, Styx replied, stopping about 15 feet away. You're not going anywhere. Panic flashed in Rick's eyes. He made a run for the car, dragging Leo with him. Get in, he screamed. But it was useless. The path was blocked by Tank, whose massive frame and equally massive motorcycle looked like a mountain that had risen from the asphalt. The sound of approaching sirens grew louder, a piercing wail that sliced through the roar of the engines. Red and blue lights began to flash against the walls of the convenience store, painting the entire scene in frantic, strobing colors. Rick was cornered. A trapped animal. He did what trapped animals do, he became dangerous. He pulled a small, wicked-looking knife from his belt and held it to Leo's throat. Everybody back up, he shrieked, his voice cracking. I'll do it. I swear to God, I'll do it. Leo let out a small, terrified whimper. Styx froze. The bikers tensed, their hands clenching, but they held their positions. They knew not to escalate. This was a job for the police now. 2 squad cars screeched into the lot, finding a gap the bikers had left for them. Doors flew open, and officers emerged, weapons drawn. Detective Miller was in the lead, his face grim. Let the boy go, Rick! Miller shouted, his voice booming through a megaphone. It's over. We know who you are. We know you took him from his mother. Rick's eyes were wild. He was sweating, his gaze darting between the cops, the bikers, and the terrified child in his grasp. For a moment, it seemed like he might break, that he might do the unthinkable. Styx took a slow step forward, raising his hands in a non-threatening gesture. He directed his words not to Rick, but to the boy. Leo, he said, his voice calm and steady, cutting through the chaos. Look at me. It's okay. We are here. You're safe now. Leo's eyes, filled with tears, met Styx. In that moment, the boy's fear seemed to recede, replaced by a tiny spark of hope. He had been seen. He had been heard. That momentary distraction was all it took. As Rick's attention wavered for a split second, 2 officers moved with lightning speed. One tackled him from the side, a blur of blue motion, while Miller lunged forward, expertly twisting Rick's arm and dislodging the knife, which clattered harmlessly to the ground. Rick went down hard, a string of curses spilling from his lips. Other officers swarmed him, pinning him to the asphalt. The threat was neutralized. Styx moved past the chaos, his focus entirely on the small boy who stood trembling in the middle of the lot, suddenly alone. He knelt, bringing himself down to Leo's level. He didn't reach for him, didn't touch him. He just waited. Leo looked at the man who had been a silent fixture in his nightly terror, the man who had become his unlikely savior. The tears that had been held back for so long finally fell, silent streams tracing paths through the grime on his cheeks. He took a hesitant step, then another, and then he collapsed into Stick's arms, burying his face in the worn leather of his vest, his small body shaking with sobs of relief and exhaustion. Sticks wrapped his arms around him, holding him securely. The hard-won calm he had maintained finally broke, and a wave of profound relief washed over him. He had done it. The boy was safe. Detective Miller walked over, the cuffs clicking shut on Rick's wrists in the background. He put a hand on Stick's shoulder. "Your hunch was good," Miller said, his voice filled with a mixture of respect and awe as he looked at the ring of bikers surrounding them. "Real good. We've been looking for this guy for weeks. He's the boy's uncle. Snatched him after losing a custody battle. Been using the kid to try and extort money from the mother." Sticks just nodded, his throat too tight to speak. He gently stroked Leo's hair, murmuring soft words of comfort. The engines of the Harleys idled, a low, protective rumble that seemed to form a shield around the boy. A female officer approached with a blanket, draping it gently over Leo's shaking shoulders. She had a kind face and a soft voice. "We're going to take you somewhere warm, okay? Your mom is on her way." At the mention of his mom, Leo looked up, his eyes wide. "My mom," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "That's right," the officer said with a reassuring smile. Leo slowly pulled away from Sticks, though he kept one small hand gripping the man's leather vest. He looked up at the towering biker, his expression a mixture of awe and gratitude. "You saw me," he said, his voice barely audible. Sticks managed a small, rough smile. "I saw you, kid," he said. "We all did." The reunion happened at the police station, a place that was usually sterile and cold but felt, for that one night, like the warmest place on earth. Leo's mother, a woman named Sarah who was herself a police officer in a neighboring city, burst through the doors, her face pale with anxiety. Her eyes scanned the room frantically until they landed on her son, who was sitting in a chair, sipping a cup of hot chocolate provided by the desk sergeant. "Leo," she cried, a sound that was half sob, half shout. Leo jumped from the chair and ran into her arms. They clung to each other, a tangle of limbs and tears and whispered assurances. It was a moment of pure, unvarnished love, a light so bright it seemed to push back all the darkness that had preceded it. Sticks and his brother stood quietly in the corner of the waiting room, their large frames seeming to take up all the space, yet they were utterly silent, respectful observers of the sacred moment. They had done their part. This was the reward. After a few minutes, Sarah, with Leo still attached to her side, approached them. Her eyes, red-rimmed but shining with gratitude, found Sticks. "You're the one," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You're the one who saw him." "I'm glad I could help," Sticks said, feeling awkward under the intensity of her gaze. She shook her head, tears welling up again. "Help? You saved him. You saved my entire world. I've been going out of my mind. That monster, he made Leo call me every night, to tell me he was okay, to read from a script, just to torture me. I couldn't trace the calls because it was a payphone." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "How can I ever thank you?" "No thanks necessary," Tank rumbled from behind Sticks. "We take care of our own. And kids are everyone's own." Sarah looked at the group of imposing men, seeing past the leather and the patches to the hearts of protectors that beat beneath. She gave them a watery smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice encompassing all of them. "All of you." Detective Miller clapped Sticks on the back. "The DA is going to have a field day with this. Kidnapping, extortion, child endangerment. Rick isn't going to see the outside of a prison cell for a very long time." That night, as Sticks rode home, the rumble of his engine felt different. It was not just shaking loose old memories, it was making room for a new one. A good one. He had left the force because he felt he wasn't making a difference anymore, that he was just sweeping back an endless tide of human misery. But tonight, he had made a difference. He had saved one boy. And for now, that was enough. It was more than enough. The story did not end there. In the weeks and months that followed, the bond between the quiet biker and the brave little boy deepened. Styx visited Leo and his mother, at first just to check in, but soon the visits became a regular occurrence. He taught Leo how to properly wash a motorcycle until it gleamed, how to tell the different engine sounds apart. He never pushed the boy to talk about what happened, but he created a space where Leo knew he could if he wanted to. A year after the rescue, on a bright Saturday morning, the Iron Sentinels hosted a charity ride. It was Sarah's idea. She wanted to give back, to create something positive from the horror they had endured. The event was called Leo's Ride, and all the proceeds went to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Hundreds of bikers from all over the state showed up, their engines a thunderous chorus of solidarity. Leo, now 11, sat proudly on the back of Styx's bike, wearing a small leather vest of his own, a custom-made patch of an Iron Sentinel standing guard over a lion cub sewn on the back. He was no longer the silent, fearful boy from the gas station. He was bright, confident, and quick to smile. He had found his voice again. Styx saw the change not just in Leo, but in his club. The ride gave them a new mission, a focus for their protective instincts. It became an annual event, growing larger each year, a testament to the ripple effect of a single act of vigilance. One man's refusal to ignore his gut feeling had sparked a movement. Time marched on. The years turned a boy into a young man. When Leo was 18, he stood before a small crowd at the 10th annual Leo's Ride. He was tall and strong, his eyes clear and full of purpose. Styx stood at the side of the stage, his arms crossed over his chest, a rare, proud smile on his face. 10 years ago, Leo began, his voice steady and strong. I was a ghost. I thought no one could see me. I thought no one was listening. But one man did. He wasn't a cop then, he wasn't on duty. He was just a man who was paying attention. Leo's eyes found Styx in the crowd. He taught me that you don't need a badge to be a hero. You just need to be willing to see what others look past. He and the Iron Sentinels didn't just save me that night, they showed me what true strength is. It's not about being the loudest or the toughest. It's about using your power to protect those who have none. He paused, taking a breath. Next fall, I'll be entering the police academy. I want to spend my life paying forward the gift that was given to me. I want to be the person who sees the kid at the payphone. I want to be the one who listens. A roar of applause and rumbling engines filled the air. Styx felt a familiar tightness in his throat, but this time, it was not from sorrow. It was from a pride so immense it felt like it could burst his heart. Later that day, as the event wound down, Leo found Styx polishing the same piece of chrome on his handlebars. You still do that, Leo said with a grin. Old habits, Styx replied, his voice gruff. You sure about this cop thing? It's a hard life. I'm sure, Leo said, his expression serious. Because of you, I know what it looks like when one good person stands up. I want to be that person. He held out his hand. Thank you, Styx. For everything. Styx didn't take his hand. Instead, he pulled the young man into a rough, one-armed hug. You make us all proud, kid, he mumbled into his shoulder. The story of Styx and Leo became a quiet legend in their community, a reminder that heroes are often found in the most unlikely of places. It served as a powerful lesson that vigilance is a form of compassion, and that paying attention is one of the most profound acts of kindness we can offer one another. It's a reminder to trust that feeling in your gut when something seems wrong, because you might just be the only person who notices, the only one standing between a vulnerable soul and the darkness. Sometimes, the most important thing you can ever do is simply to see someone who feels invisible.